One is a goofy, if at times serious, hacker romp about the Cold War, the other a hyper-serious sequel that really loves zooming in on things. WarGames, They Remade It.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of They Remade It. I'm your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
And just to cut to the meat of things, as we usually go right into the weather, holy sweet merciful Christ, it's not almost 100 degrees today. I'm so happy.
I don't know what it was, because we had like that intense heat wave for 3 weeks where around this area and a lot of other parts of the Midwest, the heat index was at like 120. But there was one day last week where I think it was like Saturday, or Friday, it was still scalding hot, and then the next day, the low was like 57.
I know.
It's been whiplash since then. But yeah, I've been enjoying the lack of humidity.
Yeah, I think, at least on our end, because I'm in the American South, and I'll add more detail. I live kind of near the coast, so we got a bit of the weather from the recent hurricane.
Right, Hillary.
I mean, we didn't get hardly any. Like, they always talk a big thing of it, but once it gets we're far enough inland that by the time it got to us, it was pretty much just like a day of rain. But after that, like once that passed over, pretty much everything slowly started getting better and better. And then this morning, I went out to get breakfast, and my fucking thermometer on my car was 68 degrees. I was like, I could cry. This is so nice.
That's beautiful.
Oh, it's beautiful, and like I live in an area where it is about as swampy as it can get where I live, and just this whole fucking state, really. And it's the kind of thing where whenever it's humid enough, you can actively see the humidity, like with the naked eye, and it's the worst. But now it's like I can actually like see clear skies, and not everything feels all slightly murky. It's nice because it's not 150% humidity anymore.
Well, I mean, that sounds beautiful. It sounds like it's really the environment where you should be able to get out and go and do, like play in the park, or maybe go fishing if that's your thing, a beach,
So Starfield came out the other day. That's the early access of it, at least, which I obviously paid extra money to get. That's been the last few days for both me and my girlfriend. We both are diehard Bethesda fans, as it is, and it's been getting a lot of like assorted crap from various sources online as far as quality goes. I can understand some of it. Like there's a lot of like the whole things of like traveling between places. It's basically all just fast travel stuff. There's not a whole lot of integration between space and planets and everything. There's not a lot of great mapping systems. So far, I haven't really gotten the downside of it. Like I get it a little, but beyond that, I think it's fine. I think it's just a new system to get used to more than anything. And we've really barely scratched the surface of the game at this point. It does have a very bad habit of not tutorializing things well enough, so we've been figuring out a lot of shit on our own. But beyond that, there's something about Bethesda games. I think Bethesda has, knowingly or not, kind of mastered the art of carrot and stick, where it just keeps kind of like dragging, like pulling you along with enough things of like, oh, what's over here? What's this thing I can do? What's this thing this person's talking about? And it expands itself just enough to want you to make it so that you want to keep going. So I'm having a blast with it. I think it's all that in a bag of chips. So I've been trying to ignore people's comments online about it mostly.
Very nice. I'm looking forward to playing 20 hours of it and then just dropping it because I'm bored. As all open world games usually tend to affect me, but I think it arrives on Game Pass in about 4 days from when we're recording this, and I actually have an alert set because it's like, oh cool. I mean that's the main thing, because I'm always like, I don't know about open world games, I don't have the time, and they don't suck me in like they used to. But if I'm gonna get to play it for free, I mean technically free, because I already play Game Pass, then why not? At least try it. So, and I've seen some of the gameplay vids and stuff, so I know kind of what I'm expecting. But. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see what I think when it finally comes out.
I'm telling you for the sake of your completionist kick that it might drive you to the brink of insanity to do that, just because it is such a big thing. But at the same time, it looks bigger than it truly is, which I think again that's just Bethesda games in general. So there's enough within it that you can just kind of stick to the stuff that you want to do, that it doesn't really become that much of an issue. If you want to go for 100% completion, I imagine it's not near as hard as it seems. But at the same time, I have seen you go batty over things that I did not think could have a completionist angle to them. So who knows?
Yeah. Well, like I said, since it's like an open world thing, I've chilled a lot in my quote unquote old age. Heavy quotes on that. But
yeah, we are both. Are you 28 at this point or 27? Sorry.
I'm approaching 28 in a few months.
Yeah.
But
I turned 27 in a couple months. So
age doxing. But
I mean, yeah, I think we've established that relatively early on. Of we are basically just old geriatric men in the body of young men.
Maybe we did. That's possible. Yeah. But yeah, I've chilled a lot when it comes to completing open world games. I tend to drop them more often than not. Like I don't even finish. I know I've mentioned on the show multiple times that because I have to do everything, I've never finished Skyrim because I get bored of it. So I know how the game ends, but I've never seen it firsthand. So
yeah, that's fair. It's a pretty boring ending, to be frank. But beyond my Starfield addiction, because that's only been for the last few days, I've actually also been playing a few other ones. I've been playing, I can't remember if I mentioned last time, I've been playing through the third Dragon Age game, Dragon Age Inquisition.
Yeah.
Which I found pretty good. I've come up to the end now, and I've kind of I've just kind of dropped it near the end, which tends to happen with me in BioWare games, weirdly enough. Where I just I don't really have the desire to finish it up because I haven't really connected with the characters as much as I wanted to. I'm realizing I don't really give a shit about all of this. I care much more about the Mass Effect series. I enjoy the story in that a lot more, and I think I mentioned before. I think it's just because there's a certain level of relatability that makes it easier for me to grip into. Whereas just everything in Dragon Age is so steeped in so many different like pseudo lores and like very thinly veiled like forms of like prejudice and racism and everything. Where it's just like, God, this is just a slog to try to get through. And so it's just never. I kept trying to get into it as much as I could, but it just never got me. So I really don't have the desire to finish it up at this point. Despite I think I'm on the literal next to last level. But I'm just like, nah, I don't care about any of these characters. I don't know why I should even continue this. It's like so that one's pretty much probably going to be shelved for now. But beyond that, I also found another random one. I also have Game Pass, and they've been releasing a few games in preparation of Starfield that kind of have a similar feel, like some sci-fi games, some exploration games. And one that popped up was one called Everspace 2. Hadn't heard of Everspace 1, frankly, but what it actually amounts out to is that it's basically a flight sim game, but in space. If you've ever played a game called Rebel Galaxy, it's kind of a similar vibe to that, where you're entirely in your ship. You never walk outside of your ship. The only time you even see your person outside of your ship is during these like concept art cutscenes whenever you interact with other characters. I've been oddly gripped by it. It's not that deep at the end of the day. It's a pretty stock standard modern sci-fi plot, but for some reason about it, the controls of the ship and everything, and just the gameplay loop that it has you go on, it's oddly addictive. The ship controls really well. There's a lot of intuitive features to it and everything, and I don't know. It's like I said, it's not that deep, and it wouldn't be worth more than the price of free. Frankly, I might pay at maximum $10 for it, but it's got a decent thing going on. It doesn't overcomplicate anything that it's going for. And it's clear that I am one of the minority in that sense because there's a thing on Xbox games that when you play and when you get achievements that very few other people have received, you get like an extra little like an extra like sound bite that plays whenever you get the achievement. And as I was playing through it, after I got past like the first 2 or 3 main storyline missions, literally every single achievement I got was the rare achievement, meaning that barely anyone has played it beyond like the first like maybe hour or two. So I'm like, oh no, I feel bad for these developers. There's a lot of effort here. it's pretty sad.
I've been seeing more and more of that lately on like games I'm playing on PC through Game Pass, or like Steam, which doesn't have a special thing for it, but like the achievement will glow when you look at it. And I guess it's just because the games I'm playing, because it's like these aren't hard and they aren't really bad, but I guess no one else is playing them, so I get.
I don't know what's up with that. Like, there's not as much. I really do kind of blame just how review systems have gotten at this point. Like, everyone's been like saying, like IGN gave Starfield 7 out of 10 review, which in IGN is basically raking it over the coals. It's just gotten to this point where the 1 through 10 rating system is so heavily one-sided at this point, where anything other than a 10 is dog shit. And I think it's to that end, it means that a lot of smaller things, a lot of things that are just kind of average, aren't getting the kind of love that they would have used to. Like
Yeah.
I think Everspace 2 is great. I think it's a great time. It's a nice little it's a lot more casual than a lot of these other games are these days. Dear God, I will never play the new God of War games. They seem like such investments.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of those things because like God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok, I did 100% complete both of those, but that's less a gameplay thing because the gameplay gets really tiresome after a while. It's just I do like the story, the story, and it's weird because God of War is one of the only franchises that's out there right now that I actually do still get invested with the story, even if on a surface level, it's a lot of elements of it are kind of basic or played out. I don't know. It still draws me in for some reason. But yeah, as far as reviews go, I don't look at them anymore. They're pretty well useless because anything. I mean, if you look at it from like 1 being absolute dog shit and 10 being perfect, which would make sense in most people's minds, 5 would be average. But anymore, the way that review sites, make reviews, anything less than 6 is actually unplayable. Like not just bad, but like broken. And that's just kind of the way it's. I don't know. I think the system doesn't work. It can't entirely be removed because ratings are so baked into. I mean, us as a society, the way that we like to look at things, we like collecting things, we like organization, and we like, comparing, which is what we do on the show. But people are like, I like this more than that, so this is the way the scale is going to go. But I wish, if ratings weren't tied to monetary gain, I wish we could just get rid of them entirely because they don't do us any good.
Yeah, that's a sad fact. Is like a big enough studio is basically just going to pay for their reviews. So
right,
and then small developers who can't afford to do that end up kind of getting fucked. So
and the people that actually write the reviews get paid peanuts. So none of this is worth anything except for the people at the very top. I wonder why.
Which hey, apparently, in the more topical side of news things, the writers and actors strike that's going on. Apparently, they have actually also been in talks with video game developers of talking about a strike on their end as well.
I saw that. Very exciting.
So that might also be getting addressed on that end as well. So, hooray for the summer of strikes. Well, going into the autumn of strikes.
In Washington Post, you're a bad group. Stop writing articles trying to shut this down. This is
shut the fuck up. Yeah, y'all got money for good PR, but you don't have money to pay them better? Okay.
Oh.
So if it weren't clear, listeners, we are both very pro-strike and pro-union. At least I am. I don't want to necessarily put words in your mouth, but I am. If you need to start making your little political charts of me, yeah, put it a bit farther left than where you have it already.
I probably won't discuss my actual beliefs, but if you just listen to me talk, you can probably pick up on it pretty easily.
Yeah, no. I don't necessarily wear my shit on my sleeve, but I'm not covering it up either.
Right.
So. But yeah, anyway, to get off the... Because, God knows there's no amount of politics we'll be talking in this episode. That is pretty much the extent of what I've been consuming. It's pretty much just been games. Yeah, I will say, we recently actually just watched the live action first Addams Family movie. Like with, like I can't remember any of the actors in it, but
Raul Julia.
Yeah, I don't know.
He was Gomez. I have not seen that in a long ass time. I know that Raul Julia is in it, and I know that Christopher Lloyd is Uncle Fester. Christina Ricci, that's the other one. I forget everybody else. Just those three are the only ones I remember.
Yeah, Hannah and I just watched that the other night because Hannah's actually trying out for. There's a Addams Family musical that she's trying out for. So we were watching it for research purposes.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Research, I love that.
Yeah, of course. Plus, it was just fun. It holds up. Yeah, no, there's not a whole lot to be said about it. I've seen it plenty of times. I think it's a damn decent movie. But beyond that, that's basically it. I haven't had a whole lot of extra time for stuff beyond just playing games in my off time. It's hard to sit down for a movie sometimes, whereas a game I could just pick up for like 20 minutes.
I'm glad that I can early in the mornings when no one else is at the office, I can just put a movie on while I'm working. I mean, one, I'm able to multitask, which helps, obviously. I'm able to focus on both things at once. But also, it's just like I watch a lot of shit that way. A lot of trash.
That is a smart way to go about it. I still work from home, so I could technically do that, but I don't do so well whenever I'm... Working from home is good for me, but at the same time, if given the option, I will go chill on the couch to watch something for a few minutes. So yeah. Whenever I work, I gotta just dedicate myself to the work.
I understand.
Yeah, no, that's the extent for me, if you've got anything more substantial.
Oh, I do. Well, firstly, I'm glad you brought up Addams Family, because that's the perfect segue. Because the first thing is I've rewatched a couple of things that I haven't seen since I was younger. Things like Tim Burton's Mars Attacks, which doesn't hold up as well as I remember, but it's still fun at least, which is good. And Killer Clowns from Outer Space, which I still adore. Still love that. A lot of camp there. But speaking of Addams Family, one of the rewatches I did was the Casper movie from the 90s.
Oh my god.
Which does not hold up at all. It's atrocious. But yeah, Christina Ricci is the main girl in that, which I don't know if I knew. I mean, that's one of those things where I had Casper on a VHS tape and used to put, like, that's how long ago I had this thing. And so I didn't know anything about anything. And now I watch it and I'm like, oh my god, how did they get literally everybody that has ever existed to show up in this movie? Because it's like Eric Idle and John Cassier and Clint Eastwood, and I'm like, what the fuck is happening? It's
Dan Aykroyd shows up for a sec.
He does. It's bizarre, man. But not great. Not great. There's some fun stuff in it, but overall.
Yeah, I still, what little hazy memories I have of it, I'm like, that's an odd movie.
Yeah. I was like, oh, Brad Garrett is the fat ghost. Why do I not remember that? Now it's so true. Easy. It's impossible to not know know when you hear Brad Garrett's voice. But as a kid, I was like, I don't know who the hell that is. But yeah, those were some rewatches. As far as new things for me, there were a couple of new items that I watched that I hadn't seen before. I finally watched Zack Snyder's Justice League, and I was like, oh, this is just as bad as I thought it would be.
Hey, it means I don't have to watch it.
Yeah, you're safe for now. But another, like, a weird one I had never even heard of that I watched, it's a Michael Caine movie from, like, 1990 or 1991 called A Shock to the System, which is really, really strange. It's like a watered-down American Psycho, where Michael Caine is this businessman, who basically gets tired of the lifestyle. I mean, primarily because he's old and he, the new folks are coming in and he doesn't get a promotion, but a younger guy gets it. And he, like, snaps and starts killing people. So it's kind of got some American Psycho blood in there, but it's very strange. It's not well put together. Michael Caine is, like, sleeping through this movie. There's, like, one scene where it feels like he's actually acting, but just as far as bizarre things go for this movie, okay, first of all, he's the main character, but he also narrates the movie. But he narrates the movie as if the narrator is a different person looking on this guy. He's like, oh, look at this guy, glad I'm not him. Until, like, the end of the movie, and all of a sudden the narrator is speaking in the first person, which is just whiplash. Very poorly assembled and confusing in that regard.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, so you are the narrator, great.
I chalk it up to it being British.
Maybe. Well, he's British. The movie's not.
Oh, well, then I have no fucking clue.
Well, maybe. Maybe whoever wrote it was, but, and then, like, something else that doesn't really make sense. So he's killing people, but he's not actually killing people. He's setting up Jigsaw-style coincidence traps so that people end up dying. Like, he shows his wife, who is apparently a harpy. He shows her how to turn on a light bulb in the basement, and he's like, okay, so when you turn the light bulb on, you have to grab the base of it, and also there's this metal pipe over here, make sure you grab that, and then he, like, sets it up and, like, undoes some electrical tape or something so that when she goes to do it while he's at work, she electrocutes herself. And that's basically all of his kills in the movie, is he's setting up these weird coincidences so people end up killing themselves. He's like, I didn't have anything to do with that. So, not as exciting as American Psycho. And then...
Yeah.
And then also there's, like, a weird magic angle. There's not actually magic in the movie, but Michael Caine seems to think that he's a wizard because he can do these things. And he keeps, like, talking to himself and saying magic phrases when he thinks people are gonna die. He's like, bippity, boppity, boo. And then it cuts to a boat exploding. It's so strange, and it's not well put together. And I think that the version I watched, which is the official version on Amazon Prime, by the way, I think it's a TV edit, because there's one scene where he's going off and he's saying fuck, but it's like, you don't know who the hell I am! And it doesn't match up with the lip flaps at all. Just bad.
It's times like this that I realize why there aren't a lot of Michael Caine, like, vehicle films. He's pretty much, I've only ever really actively seen him in side roles, with the only notable exception for me being the original Italian Job, which I didn't enjoy as a movie. So
Right.
it's like I didn't like him as the main character. I thought he was pretty dry, like dry for me even, and I normally like dry characters. But yeah, like he's an interesting man. He seems to be a very intelligent and well-read man, but I don't really find him that interesting as an actor. So like, I don't, at least not in the main role, you know.
I think he's fine in supporting roles. Literally, the only exception that I can think of would be Muppets Christmas Carol. Like everything else, like I think he's fine as like propping up other people. I mean, he's great in those Batman movies, regardless of whether you like him or not. Like I think he does a good job. I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird guy.
Very strange. But last movie, not to belabor everything, to finally get to the new. I saved the theater one for last, but I saw Oppie. I did get a chance to watch Oppenheimer in the theater, all 3 hours of it.
Jesus.
And you know what? It kind of flew by. It's
Really?
It's one of those things where I'm not. I don't consider myself a hipster, but sometimes I feel like, oh, everyone's loving this. Am I really gonna love it? And it's like the hype for Oppenheimer is real. Like it's a well-made, good-ass movie that knows how to do suspense. It knows how to do character moments. It knows how to create a protagonist, craft a protagonist that you're technically rooting for at parts of the movie, but overall, like, you're not supposed to side with him. And it makes that very well known. And I don't know. It's, you know what? One of the more interesting things is that obviously this is all leading up to the bombing of Japan. Those two cities in Japan specifically, but it, like, that has a presence in the movie and it affects his mental condition, but there's not a huge focus on the act itself, which I think is very interesting, and it kind of makes it more compelling. And I've seen some people complaining about that, like, you're underrepresenting the damage and the horrors of the war. And I'm like, well, one, I don't really think that's the case. I don't think they're underrepresenting it. I just think that the focus is more on this man rather than the atomic bomb. And then secondly,
almost like the movie's named after him.
Yeah, and then secondly, there's tons of other movies that you can watch if you want, like, that experience on it. It's not like this is trying to rewrite things.
Saving Private Ryan hasn't gone anywhere, y'all.
Yeah, but no, it's a great movie, to the point where I was actually thinking about going to the theater last week and watching it a second time, but in 70 millimeter, because there were openings for it at the theater that's near me. But I had a bunch of health issues and I didn't really feel like going. But I haven't, like, I don't think in my entire life I've ever watched something twice in the theater, because I've never been compelled to, but I almost did for Oppenheimer. It's a great movie. I love it, and I recommend it. Obviously, there's a length thing with it, and I've sort of softened on my, like, long movies shouldn't exist, but if they're going to be theatrical releases, I really do think we should bring back the concept of an intermission. I don't think that I've heard of movies having an intermission since The Hateful Eight. Like, we need to get back to that if we're going to be pumping out, like, 3.5 hour movies.
Yeah, no, it's just absurd otherwise. It's like, you know what, yeah, I'd like to have a nice little break, just go hang out for a minute, have like a 10 minutes, get a snack, maybe a drink.
Do some stretches, yeah, especially if you're watching it in the theater like IMAX, where it's like, wow, these seats are so tight and close together and cramped. There's no leg room. But yeah, that's Oppenheimer.
I doubt I'll be able to get out to the theater at any point to see it, but I'll try to at least see it whenever it's made available. That period of history has always been kind of a mixed bag for me. I've done research topics and papers on the Manhattan Project before, and it's a bit of a rough subject, I won't lie. So I'll have to see how I feel about it.
There is one thing that, of all the things that stuck with me from the movie, there's one thing I don't like, and it's like, I don't know, Bugs Bunny says, "What's up, Doc?" and Mickey goes, "Ho ho." Oppenheimer goes, "I am become death, destroyer of worlds." And it's like a weird drop kind of early in the movie where he's actually having sex with this woman, and she pulls out, like, a Sumerian Bible or something, like some old text, and, like, asks him to translate it in real time, and that's where the quote comes in. I was like, I don't know if that's like history or not, but that's very goofy and strange.
I know that is where the line itself comes from. It comes from a Sumerian deity, I believe.
Right. I mean, I don't know.
But yeah, reading out during sex, no. There's no way
in the original context that we knew about that happening. So
yeah, no, like, we learned that he gives an interview long after the fact where he describes where the line comes from. Like, that's where the line we all know actually comes from. Right. It is like, him saying it on this interview, and I sincerely doubt it's in en flagrante delicto, as it were.
Yeah,
That's absurd. that is absurd.
So yeah, if anything's gonna suck you out of the 3-hour Oppenheimer film, it would probably be that scene. But I thought everything else was great.
Fair enough. Yeah, no. Good shit.
Yeah. Well, I guess we've been talking a lot about I've been talking a lot about Cillian Murphy as an auteur. So it's probably time that we switch over and start talking about another auteur, that being Matthew Broderick.
Oh God. I have a theory that Matthew Broderick and Charlie Sheen are two halves of a clone that escaped containment.
That is very interesting.
I don't know why I think...
subscribe to your newsletter.
I don't know why I think that, and I didn't know where else I could bring it up. I just wanted to bring it up at the top of things before we get into the more serious topics. But I will. My newsletter will be releasing on a bi-decade basis.
It's WarGames. Alright, firstly, we'll be going through the synopsis for 1983's WarGames, directed by John Badham and an uncredited directorial debut of Martin Brest, as well as written by Lawrence Lasker and Walter F. Parks. During a surprise nuclear attack drill, many United States Air Force Strategic Missile Wing controllers prove unwilling to turn the keys required to launch a missile strike. Such refusals convince John McKittrick, played by Dabney Coleman, and other NORAD systems engineers that missile launch control centers must be automated, without human intervention. Control was given to a NORAD supercomputer known as WOPR, standing for War Operation Plan Response, programmed to continuously run war simulations and learn over time. Meanwhile, David Lightman, played by Matthew Broderick, a bright but unmotivated Seattle high school student and hacker, uses his IMSAI 8080 computer to access the school district's computer system and change his grades. He does the same for his friend and classmate Jennifer Mack, Ali Sheedy. Later, while war dialing numbers in Sunnyvale, California to find a computer game company, he connects with a system that does not identify itself. Asking for games, he finds a list including chess, checkers, backgammon, poker, and tic-tac-toe, along with titles such as Theater-Wide Biotoxic and Chemical Warfare and Global Thermonuclear War, but cannot proceed further. He visits two hacker friends, played by Maury Chaikin and diner terrorist Eddie Deezen, respectively, and these friends explain the concept of a backdoor password and suggest tracking down the Falcon referenced in Falcon's Maze, the first game listed. David discovers that Stephen Falcon was an early artificial intelligence researcher and guesses correctly that the name of Falcon's deceased son, Joshua, is the password. Unaware that the Sunnyvale phone number connects to WOPR at the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, David initiates a game of global thermonuclear war, playing as the Soviet Union while targeting American cities. The computer starts a simulation that briefly convinces NORAD military personnel that actual Soviet nuclear missiles are inbound. While they defuse the situation, WOPR nonetheless continues the simulation to trigger the scenario and win the game, as it does not understand the difference between reality and simulation. It continuously feeds false data such as Soviet bomber incursions and submarine deployments to NORAD, pushing them to increase the DEFCON level towards a retaliation that will start World War III. David learns the true nature of his actions from a news broadcast, and FBI special agents arrest him and take him to NORAD. He realizes that WOPR is behind the NORAD alerts, but he fails to convince McKittrick, who believes David is working for the Soviets, and is charged with espionage. David escapes NORAD by joining a tourist group and, with Jennifer's help, travels to the Oregon island where Falcon lives under the alias Robert Hume. Falcon here is played by John Wood. David and Jennifer find that Falcon has become despondent, believing that nuclear war is inevitable and as futile as a game of tic-tac-toe between two experienced players. The teenagers convince Falcon that he should return to NORAD to stop Whopper. Whopper stages a massive Soviet first strike with hundreds of missiles, submarines, and bombers. Believing the attack to be genuine, NORAD prepares to retaliate. Falcon, David, and Jennifer convince General Behringer, played by Barry Corbin, to cancel the second strike and ride out the attack. When the targeted American base reports back unharmed, NORAD prepares to cancel the retaliatory second strike. Whopper tries to launch the missiles itself using a brute force attack to obtain the launch codes. Without humans in the control center as a safeguard using the two-man rule, the computer will trigger a mass launch. All attempts to log in and order Whopper to cancel the countdown fail, and disconnecting the computer is discussed and dismissed, as a failsafe mechanism will launch all weapons if the computer is disabled. Falcon and David direct the computer to play tic-tac-toe against itself. This results in a long string of draws, forcing the computer to learn the concept of futility and no-win scenarios. Whopper obtains the launch codes, but before launching, it cycles through all the nuclear war scenarios it has devised, finding that they all result in draws as well. Having discovered the concept of mutual assured destruction, the computer tells Falcon it has concluded that nuclear war is a strange game in which the only winning move is not to play. Whopper relinquishes control of NORAD and the missiles offer to play a... Whopper relinquishes control of NORAD and the missiles, and then offers to play a nice game of chess. Everybody in the base celebrates.
And then everybody clapped.
Including me, because the movie was over.
Steady on, don't give opinions too soon.
Okay. Next, we'll be talking about the direct-to-video thriller film WarGames The Dead Code from 2008, directed by Stuart Gillard, screenplay by Randall Bedott, and story by Rob Kirchner and Randall Bedott. Will Farmer, played by Matt Lander, has a neighbor named Masad, played by Alberto Del Vergo, who asks Will and his friend Dennis, played by Nicholas Wright, to help him with a computer problem. While looking at his bank account, Will realizes that there's money constantly being funneled in and out and coming from an unknown location somewhere overseas. Will steals $5,000 from Masood's account to gamble on an online gambling site featuring games based on terrorist attacks. He does this in order to fund a trip that he can take to Canada for chess. In doing this, he ends up winning $25,000. The game is a sophisticated piece of US government spyware, however, and this is run by an advanced AI system called Ripley designed to find terrorists. Later, following school, Will returns home to find his neighbor under arrest. Masood gives Will an envelope full of cash to pay for a plane ticket. Unknown to all, Ripley is misinterpreting the data it received and overreacting to the situation, having labeled Will and his mother, Susan Glover, as bioterrorists. On his arrival to the airport, Will finds a large number of security guards. He evades them and meets up with his friend Annie, played by Amanda Walsh. The increased number of security guards is due to Will's friend having been detained at the airport and him revealing information about Will after having seen Will's mother, a biochemist, also being detained and screaming frantically. Will manages to crack the government network only to be found by the police and a mysterious man in an overcoat. Will and Annie are chased by the police until they get lost in the subway system. They escape and meet the man in the overcoat who says he nearly started World War III. He is revealed to be Professor Falcon, here in this movie played by Gary Reinecke, who had helped design Ripley. They travel to a power plant outside a dam, and all the while Falcon reveals to Will the nature of his father's death and his mother's relationship to the government strife. Once at the power plant, Falcon shows them the Whopper, War Operation Plan Response, from the original WarGames film. It is now being watched over by Ivan, played by Vlasta Varana, and operating a power grid. Falcon reactivates Whopper with his backdoor password, Joshua. Meanwhile, Ripley hijacks a Predator drone with missiles and a nuclear warhead on board. Falcon instructs Whopper to attack Ridley with a faux script full of cultural references. Whopper floods Ripley's system with games, but Ripley shuts down and reboots to clear the attack. Ripley then uses the Predator drone to destroy the facility housing Whopper. Will and Annie flee the facility before it's destroyed, but Falcon remains in the building. The couple is captured and taken to the room where Ripley is stored, where they discover that Falcon has transferred Whopper's program to them. They use Whopper, through Joshua, and internet users to stage another denial-of-service attack. Ripley attempts to self-destruct by launching a nuclear warhead at Washington, D.C., but Whopper again attacks Ripley, playing through two nuclear attack scenarios that result in total annihilation. As Ripley is designed not to harm itself, the third scenario is presented as a nuclear attack on Washington, D.C. Having learned the concept of futility, Ripley stops responding after the scenario is played out. After Ripley relinquishes control, Will asks Whopper if he really would have launched the missiles if Ripley had decided to continue playing, to which Whopper cracks wise, and the movie ends with a bunch of zoom-ins and zoom-outs of Philadelphia. Also, important cast members, mostly members of the government and secret agencies in this film, that are not explicitly called out in the synopsis are Colm Feore, who plays T. Kenneth Hassert and is the voice of Joshua in the movie, Maxim Roy, who plays Tina Rash, and Chuck Shimada, who plays Bill Carter. And those are your plots, ladies and gentlemen.
The early to, the early 2000s up to 2010. Why are you so weird?
Now that we're, once we started being able to create movies that didn't have to go to the theaters but could still like be directly marketed towards, we just got an influx of these DVDs that you would just find in bargain bins at Walmart, and no one will have ever seen these otherwise.
The movie poster has a look of a Tom Clancy novel.
Yeah. It's that boring, ugly orange.
Like that orange with like the weird kind of like pseudo pixelation thing going on in the background, like lots of like weird like movement lines. Seriously, look it up. The WarGames Dead Code poster. I swear it could just be a Tom Clancy novel.
Ugh. Well,
if it weren't for being as terrible, I say that I've never read a Tom Clancy novel. They might be terrible.
I can't speak to Tom Clancy as a writer. I can't even really speak to the movies based on his novels either, because I don't know what I've seen of them.
I like them. I've seen a few, but that's neither here nor there.
Right. What is here is Full Circle. Alright, starting off, we have Alan Blumenfeld, who played Matthew Broderick's teacher, Mr. Liggett, in WarGames. He was also one of the cops at Santa's Warehouse in 1996's Jingle All the Way. I just have to put this out there. I did a bit of additional research on Mr. Blumenfeld, and I found out he voiced Glottis and Boyd in Grim Fandango and Psychonauts, respectively. So he's worked with Tim Schafer a good deal. And Grim Fandango is one of my favorite games. So it's like, I had no idea.
We played a lot of that one.
Oh, yeah. I've beaten that game many a time. Jesse D. Goins was a sergeant in WarGames and played Joe Cox in 87's RoboCop. Jesse D. Goins. The biggest one we have here is Matthew Broderick, of course, who was David Lightman in WarGames. He played Professor Harold Hill in 2003, in the 2003 adaptation of The Music Man, which seems like a lifetime ago.
Oh, God, yeah.
Surprisingly enough, William H. Macy was uncredited in WarGames as a NORAD officer, which I did not see him or recognize him in that movie when I was watching. And he voiced Justin in The Secret of NIMH 2, Timmy to the Rescue.
See, that also feels like a lifetime, if only for the fact that I'm trying to forget it.
Can we just go over the fact that William H. Macy is such a big actor, especially now since he had his run on that Shameless show. He's so big, and the only two movies that we've covered him in have been WarGames, in which he is nigh unrecognizable because he's just some background guy, and then a voiceover in what is quite possibly one of the worst movies we have ever talked about on this show.
Yeah.
Very unfortunate.
Of all the things for it to be on our show.
And finally, we have Nicholas Wright, who played best friend Dennis Nichols in WarGames The Dead Code. We've seen him before in another sequel. He played Floyd Rosenberg in Independence Day Resurgence.
Yeah.
I don't know who that is either.
Okay, so I was just going to be like, I have no idea who that is.
No worries. But that is Full Circle.
Fantastic. And, I'll let you have your break after all that and state simply for the fact of, man, I didn't expect to be talking about nuclear weapons quite so much on this episode, but damn. I suppose. I don't know whether I needed to figure out if there is a technical difference between an atomic weapon and a nuclear weapon. I think it's technically the same, but I'm willing to bet that they referred to the Manhattan Project as an atomic weapon before nuclear. But that's neither here nor there.
Man, I should know this, man. I just watched Oppenheimer, which is exactly the same as getting a degree in nuclear engineering.
Oh, yeah,
I'm sorry I failed you.
I mean, having gone to gone to a school that provided nuclear engineering as a major, I've talked to some of the folks that said they were in nuclear engineering. I can't imagine they're too much smarter than just watching a single movie. I've met some stupid folks that are put in charge of some of the most powerful technology of the modern era.
What an indictment.
Yeah, I mean, there's different kinds of intelligence, All I know is it's always funny. There's a joke that went around there that if you got a major in nuclear engineering and you also had a minor in explosives engineering, you were put on a few lists before you graduated. Which is probably not. Which it might not be true, but it probably is. Which is always just funny to think about. Which it's just I'm reminded a lot of that stuff whenever I'm just watching the original WarGames, where it's just this kid just doing wacky shit that might end up in nuclear destruction. I'm like, this is the most believable part of this movie. Like at first I was gonna be like, this is absurd that this kid is just able to fuck around and figure out all this stuff and nearly destroy the world in the process. But having known people in a similar position to that, no, I can see it. I can fully understand it. It's just it's kind of wacky.
Why you just, because like a kid doing like a bunch of crazy stuff on the computer, it's just, why was Matthew Broderick always put in these roles? He's always like some shithead that I don't want to root for, even if he's supposed to be the protagonist saving the world. I'm like, I don't care about you in this movie.
This is what I mean about him and Charlie Sheen being clone brothers. Like it's a similar vibe.
Matthew Broderick is I like Matthew Broderick in what? The Lion King and Election. I don't know if you've seen Election with him and Reese Witherspoon. But
I've seen part of it, actually.
Even though I like that movie, he's a shithead in that movie too. He's just a teacher who's a shithead.
Yeah.
So
yeah, like there's nothing redeemable to be said about the man himself in these movies, but he got the job done. I really liked the Dr. Falcon character. I thought he was really interesting. He was like a lot of very, I keep being surprised by how many movies from the 80s just had a lot of very real conversations about like the inevitability of destruction and death and all that stuff. Between this and Red Dawn, I was like, man, there's a reason the 80s had so much wild bullshit going on if these were the movies being shown.
This and Red Dawn and Straw Dogs, like, we're having a rough year on the podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
My God, yeah, like not intentional. I promise. Two of those are mine though, so I don't know what to say that says about me. And it's just like just casually like they finally find this guy, and the synopsis doesn't go into the point of like, yeah, he definitely finds nuclear destruction to be inevitable, but he has a fully like made peace with it kind of attitude of, oh yeah, we're just 3 miles from a major nuke location, we'll be gone instantaneously. Meanwhile, the rest of the world's gonna suffer. It's like, Jesus.
You don't want to suffer, do you? While he's playing with his fucking pteranodon kite? Like,
yeah. It's just this strangely fascinating man and everything that he's done and like unintentionally put into motion. And it's just, I found him very compelling. It's understandable that he's not the main character, but I kind of wish he was. And then he gets completely recast in the remake / sequel / is it a sequel? I don't know.
It is 100% a sequel because this is the same character, and Whopper with Joshua exists in it all these years later. He even mentions that when they started making Ripley, he spoke up about it, and they tried to have him killed or something. So,
gotcha. Okay, because they somehow even recast Joshua / Whopper. I don't know what you're meant to call it. Because it seems clear in the original that the Doctor calls him Joshua, and it's the Whopper system that he's operating within, basically. Yeah. But then in the sequel, it's kind of a bit of both. Like Joshua is Whopper and Whopper is Joshua. I don't know.
Well, they almost treat it like there's a ghost in the machine in the sequel. Like Falcon believes his dead son is inside of the Whopper, and I think that's why he calls it Joshua. I don't.
But he refers to it in Joshua in the original more in the sense of he recognizes it as his creation and not just this functionary thing that it does. So.
Yeah, and
there's a much more nuanced performance in the original, is what I'm saying.
It's weird. So a couple of things. I guess it's probably for the best because this movie is. I mean, not to show my ass too early, but this movie's bad. But yeah. So maybe it's better that John Wood didn't come back for this movie because he died in 2011. So this probably would have been like one of, if not the last thing that he did professionally. So for the best. Maybe better he got out.
You would have thought they'd get someone at least who also has an English accent, though.
Or at least kind of looks like him. Like I know I'm constantly referring to this man on the show, but John Wood kind of looks like a thinner David Warner. And
you can see it.
This guy they got in the Dead Code, Gary, I don't know if it's Reineck or Reinecke. I said Reinecke in the synopsis, but this guy doesn't look like John Wood at all.
No, it's not even close. It's, I don't know, like, I think the best way to describe the 2008 movie as a whole. Imagine, if you've ever seen the show NCIS, imagine that with the budget of a single episode having to be stretched over the course of an entire feature-length film. That's basically this. It's a lot of those like 20-teens, like pre-2010 era graphics and things, like kind of that late era where it's, lots of zoom features and everything, lots of like all the computer graphics have they can't just like shut down, they have to like zoom off into a little wormhole as they all get like all the windows get closed off and everything. All the CG's like at least serviceable, but still very dated. It's a lot of like explosion PNGs behind these characters. It's silly, and to top it all off is Canadian. in production. It's like, that was my first sign when they were talking about being located in Canada. I was like, oh no, this is gonna be one of those.
So this
Which
movie is
not to bash Canada,
no,
obviously,
of
but
course not. Plenty
there's a
of good things
trend
to it.
with there's a trend with Canadian productions, especially in this sort of case, where they are very much the poor man's version of American productions. In this case, literally.
Toronto specifically is a great place to go and film for TV.
Yes.
I think for tax related reasons and just the way the city's set up. But no shade at Canada, no shadies at Canada. But we have to remember that this is also a direct to DVD movie. So there is this movie is frankly too much. There's bad CG effects when they have them. There's strange line readings, and I don't know if you caught them. There's a couple flubs where the director probably should have had a second take, and I kept rewinding from my bed because I was like, "What did he just say? That's not English." And there's the movie. I talk about this all the time when we cover sci-fi movies from around this point. The movie is disgustingly shot. One with all the zoom ins and zoom outs, but also the color filter. So many of these films are washed out in either gray or blue to the point where they're driving through the snow and they make it to the power facility where Whopper is. There's no gray, there's no blue, it's just daylight, and I'm like, why can't the movie look like this? This looks beautiful compared to everything else here. It's very frustrating.
The concept of color correction has always been a thing, but with the modern era came the ability to do like computerized color correction, and they really didn't get that down until, I'm willing to say, Mad Max Fury Road. Like, because there's a few scenes in there that are straight up just in basically black and white, but it's like more like black and blue, and the shots are awesome. It looks amazing. It's incredible, and I think that's like, okay, this is actually good color correction.
But at least the entirety of Fury Road also doesn't look like that though, because there's beautiful desert shots during the day that pop and almost look like a graphic novel. So I think it has those equal balance also.
Yeah, but those are also color corrected in many cases, but they're color corrected to be more vibrant rather than the opposite.
Yeah, they're like yellow.
Yeah, and so I think everything prior to that has been a little hit and miss, and if there's ever been a phrase to describe movies between the period of like 2001 to 2009, it is hit and miss. For not just the technical aspects, but for the content aspects, because if I have to hear the word terrorism any more than I already have in my life, as being the child of as being a military brat, I've heard that phrase so many goddamn times. I just, every time we're going into a movie that's in that period that's even slightly connected to like modern day politics, I'm just waiting on someone to say the word, and this one just did it in abundance.
Oh man, well then I'm sorry that I called Eddie Deezen a diner terrorist in my synopsis.
Well, that's funny. That's funny. That's an ironic twist on the formula. See, that's having fun with it. It's it's like I get tired of having the same meal every day, but then someone all of a sudden brings it to me with like ingredients swapped around. It's like, oh, this is hilarious.
Okay.
That metaphor didn't really work, but goddamn it, I feel like there's a lot of metaphors that didn't work in this fucking movie.
I understand. No worries.
Yeah. So that's kind of like, I guess, to kind of segue off of that, just kind of comparing the content of both of these. I guess it's hard necessarily to give one movie shit about the politics of the day without bringing it up of the other, because, the obsession over NORAD and nuclear weaponry and nuclear attack back in the 80s was very prevalent, and I'd say worthy of decent fear, but I'm sure it's of a similar feeling that it is today with the concept of terrorism, where it's like, at a certain point, it's just a nebulous thing people throw around to be like, oh, we need more defense spending. And so that's just it's kind of just funny to see the two compared against each other, which is still weird that the 2008 one still has the possibility of leading to nuclear war, even though ostensibly it's meant to be against like more international terrorism, which isn't as equatable to two superpowers coming to blows.
Which can I just ask a question? I've already stated that I watched The Dead Code basically half passed out in my bed. And I had to rebuild some of the synopsis from scratch because it left out a lot of details and no one gives a shit about this movie. But I don't understand the game aspect of the Dead Code. Like, even as it's written in the synopsis, it's like they use a front-facing gambling game site on Ripley to track down terrorists. Why? Are terrorists more likely to play online betting game? Like, I'm still lost on that point, and it's been days.
I don't know, and because I thought the whole thing was because I thought that ultimately the game aspect of the original movie is basically just going, this is a computer that was originally designed to play games, and that concept was built upon in order to simulate nuclear exchange. So simulate nuclear exchange in the form of like a game, and that aspect of it makes at least some amount of sense. But then in the new one, there definitely is a few moments where the main character is like playing a game and is like playing like a counter-terrorist kind of like like if Counter-Strike was all of a sudden brought up to like the nth level. Um, but beyond that, I'm not positive because they don't have the same backstory as they have with like Falcon. Because like Falcon like talks about like okay, yeah, he was a designer in like game theory and that sort of thing, and like created programming programs to make computers be capable of playing games and actually like learning from mistakes and everything. And I guess that's just meant to be. I think the only way you could understand it is if you've seen the first movie, really, even though it's not necessarily so directly linked. I'm not positive because I almost completely forgot about the gambling thing. Like that almost like came and went in my brain. I was like, oh yeah, that. And when you brought it back up, I was like, oh yeah, that was a thing they talked about. So I'm not positive.
It would be one thing if he was gambling with a lot of money on this site and then like, I don't know because I'm not writing the movie right now. I don't have the patience for that. But if Ripley like recognized on the internet that someone was transferring large sums of money and then the bioterrorism thing happened, maybe that would be one thing. But specifically, he goes to this gambling site, which by the way, too sexual. I don't care if it's 2008. Too sexual.
Yeah, no.
He goes to this gambling site, they bet 25 grand on it, and then it immediately goes to the government base where people are like, yeah, this guy bought a ton of money, let's get a track on him. What? Like, I don't understand.
I don't. It would have made more sense if it was like, like that sort of dark web shit of like, and like they were buying shit on the Silk Road when that was still a thing. It's like, it would make sense if it was something like that, but the fact of it being specifically gambling is, that's odd. I don't really get where the link ends up happening at that point. So, and then they really kind of just try to bring the game thing back at the end, where they basically just rehash the ending of the original, where they just have with a Whopper system take over and just start teaching the concept of futility to Ripley, which like I don't necessarily vibe with that ending for the simple fact of it seems like they were establishing Whopper/Joshua in the original to be kind of unaware of what he was doing. Of being like basically a child, of being like, okay, I didn't recognize that this is something that I need to learn from, that I need to avoid. And then he learns it in the end. It is kind of just like, oh, okay, I know better now. Ripley, on the other hand, at active times seems actively malicious. Like it's actively like protecting its own existence. At one point, changing a fucking stoplight somehow to make a guy get hit by a car, which was absurd when that happened. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Is this thing just Am from fucking I Had No Mouth and I Must Scream, where it's able to control everything in the world now? What the hell is happening?
Yeah, this thing is actively howling out and trying to kill people because it's like in the original, not only is Joshua or Whopper or whatever represented as sort of like a childish thing that's learning, but it's also like it does games. Like it doesn't actually think that there's terror, that things are real. It knows that it's a game. It's just that it just so happens to have access to real life missiles, and it doesn't really understand that concept. Whereas Ripley, like you said, is changing stoplight, hijacking predator drones to blow up buildings. Like it's actively reaching out over the internet,
real world
and like destroying, like trying to destroy people. Ripley kills Falcon.
Yeah, he does. She straight up does, like without hesitation.
And I think at least the concept is interesting, to have one computer teach another computer about a lesson in futility. But like you said, the way that Ripley is like presented up to that point, and the fact that she literally says like what a strange game, the only way to win is not to play, like literally just verbatim lines from the first
one. When it happened, I was like, oh, go to hell. Like, and that's the thing, is I think I want it to be a thing where like Ripley takes the wrong message or something from it, because it's clearly like she's basically fully designed by the active U.S. military and the post-Patriot Act America, where like no length is too far, basically. I want her to have the lesson of what a strange game, the only way to win is to lose, or some shit like that, and she still goes through with trying to blow shit up, and so they had to find a new way of beating her. Because like, at no point did I ever believe she could actually go for the thing of, oh, I recognize that futility is an ultimately losing game. Having been exposed to U.S. military and political ambitions like that, that's not an option anymore. It's you go to the end of the earth or you're done. Like, that's... Yeah. I fully would have believed... I don't believe for a second that this thing ever would have been like, oh, ho-hum, I guess I'll have to just hang out my coat. No, it recognizes the money that's been put into it.
That certainly would be more interesting. And to that end, technically, I think the synopsis is wrong that I read, because Ripley doesn't learn futility, and that's not why Ripley stops. They explicitly state that Ripley is designed not to let itself be destroyed, and that's why she sort of peters out when destroying Washington, D.C. in the scenario, because she's like, wait, this is going to pause. I'm going to get blown up for this? Like, that's why there was so much importance placed on that as opposed to Iraq or North Korea, which were the first two scenarios that Joshua ran through. She's like,
Yeah.
wait, I'm here. Like, it's more of a selfish lesson than anything else.
Which that's hilarious. That's a good way to go about it. Like, okay, yeah, it's a truly selfish. It is a machine that has gained intelligence, and its intelligence is telling it to be a bastard. Like,
Yeah.
that's cool. Like Joshua learned to be intelligent and like recognizing futility as a losing gamble. And Ripley isn't. Ripley did not. She was fully just like, no, screw all of you. I just want to say, if I'm going to do this, I'm at least going to survive it. So
Yeah.
it's just, I like. There's so much that could have been done differently with this whole scenario, but for the fact that they made a sequel to that in the first place is still odd, I guess.
So that's something that I kind of wanted to ask, because we don't do long overdue sequels as often as we used to on the show. We've sort of gone
very
more
often
over into remakes, but
yeah, and very often there's like, it's not necessarily for particular reasons, just very often they just tend to be very bad. And the rare cases where they're not, it's more the fact that they're remakes as much as sequels, like in the case of like Blade Runner.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a little of column A, a little of column B. But something that we tend to do on the show when an overdue sequel comes out is that we try to think through why it was made, and I'm kind of struggling on this one because
I have no idea.
There's
like,
not like
even
a huge nostalgia wave for WarGames. I think the only person in existence right now that really truly gives a shit about WarGames is Ernest Cline. And you can see that because in Ready Player One, the book,
God.
that is the WarGames is the movie that the main character has to play through. He has to pretend to be Matthew Broderick's character in WarGames in that first book, and in the movie they replaced that with The Shining. But in the book it's WarGames, and then in Armada, a book that I know that you've read all the way through. It's not as explicit, but if I remember correctly, the arcade that the main character plays at is called the Crystal Palace, which is a reference to NORAD in WarGames, because that's what their base is referred to as, Crystal Palace. So I think Ernest Cline has a lot of nostalgia for this, but even then, those books happened after the Dead Code came out. So
yeah, it's even the situation where even when we had someone like Easy Rider, whose long overdue sequel was perhaps one of the worst movies we've seen ever, like without hesitation, just poor quality, poor acting, poor everything across the board. At least then we kind of had the assumed reason that it was made for the fact that the guy who made it, the main character or whoever was doing it, just really liked the original and just wanted to have his own self-insert thing, which is like, all right, fine. Like that's a reason. At least it's a bad one, but it's a reason.
It's fanfic. Go off.
Like, all right, yeah, do your fanfic. You wanted to take the time and money to do that? All right, I can respect that at least. You did a bad job, but it's not even that in this case, because like it is a proper production. I still think it has the air of what should have been like a limited TV run. Like it was like like a limited TV series. Like this should have been broken up into like multiple episodes and things. If they had done that, that might have been kind of interesting, because then it would have made sense why the budget is so weird and why it's they're doing all the things that TV shows of the day, again NCIS and the like, had those like design choices. But the fact that it's a full-fledged movie and then it just went straight to DVD, I'm just like, I don't know. Like, was this like if this were like a Sci-Fi Channel movie, I almost would have understood it more. Because like then, sci-fi movie, like Sci-Fi TV, like made a bunch of movies like this, that were just kind of off the wall and just like, in a lot of cases, were just like really random concepts. Like one was like if a major fault line opened up right down the middle of America, like that was kind of like if like all of a sudden the tectonic plate just cracked in half. It's like, what would happen then? It's so I could see them doing this, but the fact that it's just kind of otherwise just exists is fascinatingly weird to me. Like I don't even know that many people that necessarily reference the WarGames anymore. Like
exactly,
it's not that it's not exactly it's pretty well trodden ground at this point. I don't know.
I mean, that's why I brought up the Ernest Cline thing, because like there's not a wave of nostalgia for WarGames like there are for other things from the 80s, like let alone just movie nostalgia, but 80s movie nostalgia. Like you'd be hard pressed to find like there are better movies that take things from that talk about computers, better games that talk about war, better movies with Matthew Broderick in them. I mean, surely another movie where Matthew Broderick changes his grades with a computer, Ferris Bueller, is looked back on a lot more fondly than WarGames.
And I think that's the thing. It'd be like if today, if like in maybe like 10 years from now, someone was trying to made a movie, or even just today because they've done that. If like someone was trying to make a movie about the fucking like COVID outbreak, the COVID pandemic, it's a very real topic, and I'm sure it could be entertaining. But I don't know if anyone wants to be nostalgic about that part of this era. Like, why would you want to be nostalgic about the part of the 80s that was the constant threat and, like, standing on a knife's edge that was nuclear missile defense? Like, it's an absurd concept. And, like, yeah, we have nostalgia for Ferris Bueller's Day Off because it was fun and like things were happening and it was wacky and it was low stakes at the end of the day. Meanwhile, this thing's talking about the entire destruction of the human race. Like, between this and also again Red Dawn, why the fuck did they make a remake of Red Dawn? We weren't nostalgic for this. This is scary. This is fucked up. Like, I don't know. I truly believe that someone just wanted to create some sort of like military-esque like escalation style show or style movie in the in the early like the pre-2010 era, and they just found that, hey, what if we just piggyback off of a thing that people already know, which I swear I'm pretty sure is how a lot of these remakes get done, a lot, especially a lot of the overdue sequels, is that someone had an idea for a film, realized it was similar enough to something that pre-existed, and realized they could probably just use that to kind of hold up to be the spine of it, essentially. it's it's just that's the only reasoning I can come up with here that isn't just kind of buck wild stupid.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. It's not like this movie.
So
when I say this
weirdly
movie,
enough,
I mean WarGames. It's not like it has longevity either.
no. Also, weirdly enough, I'm also being reminded of another movie that came out. It must have been post 2010, maybe like a little before. I don't know. There's a movie. It stars Shia LaBeouf, I believe. I think it's called like Eagle Eye or something.
Oh yeah, wasn't I thought that was like a. I never saw it, but I always got the impression from the trailer that that was like a Rear Window style like remake.
You don't
But with
know.
computers and drones. Huh.
I don't know. Like I ended up like I've watched like parts of it because it just seems silly. But like it's ultimately like revealed that this dude is basically getting phone calls from and receiving calls from a woman who's basically telling him, do these things or else you're gonna get arrested and all these things, and he's getting like embroiled into some kind of conspiracy. And it turns out it's a supercomputer that's basically running that's like twisting world politics, and it's oddly similar to this 2008 sequel of this nigh omniscient defense program that is kind of taking matters into its own hands, which I guess you could even extend like, oh, that's basically just Skynet from Terminator. But there's a very similar kind of feeling of like it's not quite as like grandiose as Terminator is, whereas the whole thing of like, oh, taking over the world and like wiping out humanity specifically out of malice. It's very much the thing of I am a defense computer and I am working for national defense, and it's I don't know. Like I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if someone from one project worked on the other in this case because there's a strange kind of like similar feel to the both of them. It's just like Eagle Eye actually has like a much more high budget to it. So,
Um, I'd also like to say I did a little bit of digging because there's no production details really on the creation of this WarGames dead code, but
shocker.
I did find through archive.org an article that was written that is basically MGM announcing a lineup of direct-to-DVD movies, and just listen to this. It's WarGames The Dead Code, which is a sequel to WarGames, Dark Blue, which is a remake of a 2002 film Dark Blue, Dead Like Me, which is a movie based on the Showtime series Dead Like Me, Cutting Edge 3, which is a sequel to a long-running series, Cutting Edge Films, Audrey Rose, which is a remake of a 77 movie. Like, this is just like, for some reason, in the late 2010, the late aughts, MGM was like, we have the rights to all of these things, we should start making sequels and remakes right now. And they released them all at the same time through direct-to-DVD sales.
You want to know? I can almost guarantee it had something to do with like running out on a copyright clause or something. Like the fact that they held the rights to those things, they like had to do something new. Like either they were just realizing, hey, we can make some extra cash off this, and we're low on cash flow or something, or they needed to have a fresh thing from this IP for it to continue to be like to hold like solid rights on it or something. Otherwise, it gets like maybe after that it gets like added to like I don't know like what happens like the Library of Congress, like, not the public domain or anything like that, but something similar, I imagine. It's I guarantee that's probably what spurred that to happen. It's something of this is a thing we've had for like 20, 30, 40 years. We should probably do something with it so that investors start going, hey, why is this covered in dust and why is it losing ground in as far as the public zeitgeist?
Yeah, probably.
Which it's sad how much that is always the case when it's some version of we hold this, therefore we're going to do something horrible and like something horrible and forgettable about it. Or actively malicious and start deleting content.
Interesting. I wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that shit doesn't happen anymore.
Yikes.
The best part about that joke is that it will age beautifully because it could refer to anything.
We could refer to it 100 years from now, and
if
we're here, then I'm sure it'll still be relevant. But
if I'm still alive by then, I'm going to be kind of concerned.
Oh, I meant humans, but yes.
Oh, right, yeah. I was like, I mean, if we're still around doing this, I gotta tell you about it. I like doing this. I don't know if I could do it for another 100 years.
I'm sure in 50 years, both of our brains, because of the success of this podcast, they'll remove our brains and they will put us into a military machine that can like control nukes and hijack predators and things.
We'll use all that processing power just to bitch about more remakes.
Yes, because they'll never stop.
Yeah, like come on, like, try to hook me up to a machine. Come on, I'm too stubborn and dumb for that.
I I guess to pull it back over to WarGames a little bit, just because I haven't gone off on it much, it's the dead code is so stupid and so cheap and poorly made that it's hard for it to be any contest. But honestly, aside from our discussion of John Wood earlier and his portrayal as Professor Falcon in the movie, I don't really care for the '83 WarGames movie either. Like I think it's average, especially in comparison to this direct to DVD movie. I just don't really have any care for it. Like again, I think there's tons of other movies that do different parts of this movie better. It's I don't know, it's average and dumb, and it doesn't leave a lasting impression on me. The only thing that I have really retained from this movie is in the final act, Dabney Coleman's character calls Barry Corbin's character a pig-eyed sack of shit, and I've been thinking about that for about a week now. But besides that, this movie does nothing for me.
Yeah, that's about as concise as I could have put it as well, honestly. Like, we really have had a weird trend this year of having movies from this general era that are really just like not uppers, like even a little when you start to think about it, and realizing, hey, I don't actually enjoy what I'm watching. Like, again, yeah, between this, Red Dawn, and Straw Dogs, it's just like, why did this movie get made in the first? There's so much, like, people go on and on about there being a lot of sensationalism nowadays. They do not have shit on the 80s. Like, we are, like, people have been so nostalgic for the 80s since, like, I don't know, like the mid 20 teens, especially whenever Stranger Things started, especially. That was like, I mark that as the benchmark of when 80s nostalgia has hit. It's like fucking, like, it hit critical mass. My God, some wild bullshit happened in that decade. And anytime we look into, like, a slice into kind of like the mentalities that were going on at the time, in this case with, WarGames, I just get reminded, maybe things aren't so bad. I mean, things are bad for a lot of different reasons, and I could list them, but frankly, I don't feel like being too depressed today. But, the consistent threat of existential doom isn't quite so bad as it used to be. And there's also a lot less serial killers, as it were. Like, have you ever seen some of those graphs where it's like active serial killers in the US? It was like, compared to today, there was like 200 times as many in like the 70s and 80s. It's like, my God, people were allowed to do whatever the fuck they wanted.
Well, in the 70s, you could just, like, people didn't lock their doors in suburbs.
No.
It's just like, oh, come on in. I know who you are. Like,
yeah, so anytime someone talks about things of like, oh, things used to be so safe and so easy, like, that you think that because you survived. And I need you to understand that they weren't. Like, going back to the way things were, no, you just want to go back to the time when you didn't have to worry about complicated issues. Because again, you survived. That's it. Like, that is the most fascinating part of the show, is recognizing that of, maybe things aren't so bad. Like, things are weird. They need some improvements. But dear God, at least people know to lock their doors now.
Yeah.
Oh man, I didn't want to get too political in this one, but this is close.
No, like we like you said, we've had a weird run of not only downer movies, but also like weird like military government movies, because we've had this and Red Dawn, and also Captain America, which we just did.
Oh shit, yeah.
Which I had forgotten about. So
that one was at least a little bit more like not quite so divisive, at least. Like, okay, the original,
at least
the original one was a bit, but it was done in such a cartoonishly over the top way that it was hard to take it seriously at the very least. But yeah, like the idea of like, this Red Skull guy actually being responsible for all the like assassinations during that period of time. There were a lot of assassinations during that period too. Jesus Christ. Fucking, we're gonna start finding some more uppers, man. Next season, it's gonna be all this like easy shit. We're not doing this many in a row anymore. My God.
Yeah, I'm already thinking about stuff for next, because I'm constantly thinking about the future.
Yeah.
And I'm at least starting off the year pretty light, it looks like. So yeah, we'll see how that goes, and if that shifts at all, because that schedule is never set in stone. I tend to change it all the time. But
I gotta start finding more like historical films, like things like from prior to like the 1920s or something, like something earlier than that era, like that has some remakes. That way I can avoid some of the more modern politics. Because my God.
Mm-hmm.
It's It's not even that it's getting too real. It's just getting too depressing.
Yeah. Like, no, I understand completely.
Yeah. Again, like I think things are better now than they probably have been in most of our history. But dear God, the fact that I keep being reminded of that is a little rough.
It's yeah. Well, I mean, I think we've well and truly given our thoughts.
Yeah, both of these kind of suck for different reasons. At least the original is the original is decent in the fact that it was a pretty decently made movie. There's a lot of lines in it that are very iconic that are kept up, like, shall we play a game, or, the only way to win is not to play.
Pig-eyed sack of shit, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Things we use daily.
Yeah, they're very iconic lines, and I think it's a very heavy subject, and it's done in what I believe to be a very unique way, but it doesn't make me feel any better about the longevity of the human race. So I'll call that a solid average movie. And then the sequel sucks. So
the end. I'm in the exact same boat, and I have no additional thoughts on that matter. You know what? One additional thought. We don't have to have a big conversation about it. I just forgot I was going to bring it up. The sequel tricked me when they kept referring to his the main character's dead dad, because it's like, yes. Oh, and he liked computers and things. I was like, is this motherfucker's dad going to be Matthew Broderick?
Yeah, his character.
I thought that's the way they were going, especially because then it's like Falcon knew him, but no, he was just some guy that I knew.
Yeah, like he talked about I taught him in MIT and everything. I was like, oh, that's definitely not the Matthew Broderick character.
Yeah,
unless that there's a whole an extended story about him after the fact. Yeah, no, that's.
Thanks for wasting my time, movie. Don't even bring it up then. Don't even go into it like that. His dad is dead. Maybe Falcon knew him, and it's like, I'm so sorry, but there's this whole government conspiracy, whatever, for some unnamed guy that we've never seen before and doesn't affect the plot. Fuck you.
Yeah, and this really just is like just a daytime television, like cop drama, military drama show. Like that's just like I've seen so many of those episodes, just like either watching it at the gym or hanging out with some of our friends who used to watch some of that stuff. Like, yeah, this is just that. It's just that, but in the movie form. Like, it's really stupid bullshit background of like conspiracies and like revenge plots and everything that don't really go anywhere. It's like, yeah, no, that's it. It's like,
yeah,
I don't know why they made this fucking movie.
Sorry, everyone, we failed you. We couldn't figure it out. We have some theories, but
yeah, that's the most we have when it comes to overdue sequels usually.
Yeah.
Hey, at least Easy Rider was easy to understand.
Oh yeah, some lawyer from Michigan.
Yeah, that's the only positive thing we'll ever say about that movie. Actually, the more I think about it, the more my lifespan seems to decrease. So, shall we do socials?
Sure. Actually, before we go to socials, real quick, something maybe I'll do from time to time. I just want to get a quick question out there. Just get a good bit, and we don't have to think on it too much. But this is because I was thinking of this the other day. You have mentioned in the past The Lion King as a movie that we will never cover on this show. Right, and yes. if we do, it won't be the animated Lion King compared to the recent remake. It'll be something strange. So yes. I'm curious, aside from The Lion King, is there any other movie that you don't ever want to cover on this show? Because I have one. And that's Lolita. I don't really want to talk about.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's extremely fair. No further discussion required on that one.
Sorry, Mr. Kubrick. I don't really.
Respect, but also respect, but also no respect. Yeah. Ben-Hur. It's too long, and I find both of them very boring.
Interesting.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think like those big epic. There's a lot of those kind of movies that were like big epics, and sometimes they've been remade. But having seen the first Ben-Hur nearly in its entirety and the first like 30 minutes of the remake of Ben-Hur, I think that might be the most boring episode we would ever do. I truly believe that. I think it is not worth our time even a little. Like, we've done some long movies on here before, but they've usually been worth it, like in the case of like The Seven Samurai. But that is not one of them. It is. I do not care for it even a little, and I just.
Interesting.
It's an endurance test more than anything else.
I think that the Ten Commandments would probably fit into that category as well. And funny enough, I think that both of those movies they were both made by Cecil B. DeMille. But I think the remake is like 4.5 hours or something. So
fuck off. Yeah, I'm kind of anything within that range of those like kind of biblical / Roman-esque epics that just like decide to be as long as an afternoon. I just no, like they in no case has they ever truly been worth that kind of time frame. That and any sort of like. Maybe any sort of those like, there's a lot of movies out there that have been like really hokey kind of things, like kind of in the vein of like Plan 9 from Outer Space, where people have done some remake version of an old property that's just truly batshit level bad, and also poor budget and everything. I don't. I know you and some of our friends have a distinct love of like truly just unironically badly made movies and everything. I can sort of see the appeal, but I'd rather not have to do that for the show. we've we've done a few of those that are on here, but those have mainly just been unintentionally. If they're ever unintentional, it's fine. Like, again, the case of Secret of Nim and Easy Rider come to mind. But the ones that's like very well known to be like, oh yeah, no, this is hokey bullshit that people like, you know, basically there's more cult following than anything. Yeah, and pretty much that whole general vein I could just never really do. Like things like, oh, Dracula goes to college or whatever the fuck those things are.
No, that's funny. I think around 2018 we tossed around the idea of doing an episode on Manos, The Hands of Fate, because there is a sequel that came out called Manos Returns, but I think it's pretty hard to get a hold of, so we wouldn't be able to do it anyways. I don't know where you can watch it.
So I think if it's a situation where we know full well going into it that the remake or original or whatever is so horrendously, notoriously bad, it just doesn't feel worth it sometimes. Mm-hmm. In the case of like, again, when we don't necessarily know it, it can be actually really funny, and we go into it and we just realize, oh wow, we didn't know what we were getting into. But when we know like the answer before we even start the episode, like before we even start prepping for the episode, I don't think it's worth it. Like, kind of like I feel like that's time we could have spent on some of the more interesting options.
No, understandable, and I agree.
Yeah.
All right.
And I'm sure I have other answers to this, but those are the biggest one would be like Ben-Hur. Just I didn't care for the original. I know I wouldn't care for the remake.
I'll scratch it off the 2024 list then. No Ben-Hur at Christmas time.
God.
All right. No, perfect. Thanks for humoring me with that.
Of course.
It's just something I was thinking about. Maybe I'll do more of that in the future if I actually have a question worth asking. I won't like force myself to come up with them. But I'll
try to think of a few myself. I might come up with a thing of like, like what is a movie that you think needs to be remade?
Oh, well, fuck. Well, I need to prep for that because I have
go right
a
ahead.
number. I'm thinking about that all the time. I have a number of answers for that.
Yes. Because like we talk about things of like, why was this remade? Like, was this worth being remade? That sort of thing. Do we truly believe, if any, do you truly believe there are some that need to be remade, that deserve to be?
100%.
Fantastic.
All right.
I got all I got out.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go through our socials then. So go ahead and favorite, follow us on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Podbay, Podomatic. Not on Stitcher anymore. It's officially gone now. YouTube, things like that. But we are hosted on Spotify for podcasters.
Yeah, it's not the same.
I understand. I was like, is he gonna do it? Is he gonna do it? All right. Go and yeah, go ahead and follow us on any of those and leave reviews because they can only help. Go ahead and send us an email, theyremadeit@gmail.com, for anything you like about the show, dislike about the show, things you want changed, episodes that you would like to see in the future. If you have an answer to a question, like what's a remake you don't want us to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if you ever just like, please don't. Say.
Yeah, like fuck it. You want to just be like, hey, don't do this one. Like, we might say, okay, less work for us.
Don't do Trilogy of Terror, please. But yeah, we can only appreciate that. And go ahead and follow us on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, for the time being. I believe I've mentioned in the past that I put us in for Blue Sky, which is what people are moving over to, but there's like a wait list since it's an alpha. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead and follow us there for information on when episodes are going live. Full circle diagrams I put together regarding actors and actresses that we've covered multiple times on the show. Posters, art for things that we've been talking about, that we've been watching, reading, playing, whatever. And potential future episodes, which I'm constantly pumping out there. You know, my brain is filled with ideas for potential future episodes, even if we'll never cover them. I'm pretty sure I've put posters out there for the 10 Commandments. Like, will we do it? But my answer is no. But I'll do that anyways.
No, fair enough.
So, and that's it for socials.
Fantastic. Yeah, always eager to hear from folks, and see if there's any. Hey, if there's ever a question you just want to ask us, like in general, like even outside of the things we've asked, like go for it. We're more than willing to answer that sort of thing.
Oh, sure.
Because we are starved for personal content, and you know what? We take this little slice of social interaction very seriously.
Yeah. The only time I interact with people.
Yeah. The only other time I do it is when I'm running my D&D game, and frankly, I feel like that's one of the more sad sentences I've ever said in my life.
There's other people there.
Yeah, but the fact that that's my main form of social interaction these days is I don't. Bars are too expensive.
Yeah, I understand.
And otherwise it's too friggin' hot. Except now it's not. So actually, maybe I'll go be social today. Holy shit!
Oh
Wait,
man, Stu's getting blasted tonight.
but also Starfield's still a thing. So
Oh well, maybe not then.
yeah, I will see you all when the winter is over. I believe.
Drinking at home.
Woo! I don't. To my family that does listen to this, I don't binge drink or anything. Don't worry. That's a joke. That is a joke. That is absolutely
I'm not
a joke.
An alcoholic.
I'm not an. I have the last time I had a drink was maybe like 2 weeks ago at this point. So don't worry. I keep forgetting sometimes my family does sometimes listen to this. So hi, Len/Dad.
So as not to make Thanksgiving awkward, I'm required to say that this has been a bit.
I don't get a text message a few weeks from now. Hey, you doing okay? I'm doing fine. Anyway, as always, I am your totally not an alcoholic, seriously, Stuart.
And I'm a pig-eyed sack of shit, Jacob.
I knew you were going to do it. I knew it.
I had to. It's required by law.
Oh my god. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Can we disarm the missiles?
Over 1,000 of them. There's no time. At this rate, it'll hit the launch codes in 5.3 minutes.
Mr. McKittrick, after very careful consideration, sir, I've come to the conclusion that your new defense system sucks.
I don't have to take that, you pig-eyed sack of shit.
No, I was hoping for something a little better than that from you, sir, a man of your education.
General, it's the president.